All right, this is part two of the Bebonos podcast for the NFL 2022 preview. Not what we intended, but we'll make the best of the situation. So, in the first part, we were discussing at the end the widest range of outcomes or the teams with variance, one way or the other on their side or against them this year. And we had left off with San Francisco, so we just got done discussing San Francisco. So, Seth, I think you were going to discuss Seattle next.
Yeah, they have perhaps some of the least variance in the league. They had a quarterback choice between Drew Lock and Geno Smith, and they decided to go with the devil they knew and Geno Smith, which says very, very bad things about Mr. Lock. But yeah, they look. This is one of those situations where 6 wins if you do, 5 wins if you don't. So I would say they have some of the least variance. Although obviously, in any given NFL season, sure they could even finish 9-8 if things go well, or they could finish 1-16. Who the hell knows? But yeah, they have less variance than the average team, particularly from their level of quarterback play. Geno's not a guy who he's not going to play hero ball, nor will he play the hero. So they have their fate. All right, what's the next topic up? We recorded, just so everyone's listening, we recorded all of this yesterday, and then somehow it fell into the aether, and so now we're trying to recreate all of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I think you were going through the NFC. Did you want to? I don't think you did much of the AFC with variance.
No, I think we did the AFC first, actually.
Oh, did we? Okay. All right. Well, we'll either way, you could you'll touch base on the AFC shortly, anyways. But
exactly.
Before a couple more questions before we go into the actual NFL previews. The first one was related to the biggest risers and fallers. Although I guess your answer here might not. I guess I probably didn't need to specifically ask this one, but you can answer it anyways.
So, as I wrote in the outline, I don't really care what you did last year, but in terms of like a riser, Buffalo 2 years ago was in the AFC Championship game, and they were outclassed. Last year, they faced Kansas City, what we thought was the de facto AFC Championship game after Cincinnati had already beaten Tennessee. Whoever won the Buffalo KC game was going to host the AFC Championship game against Cincinnati. We figured they would win that game. And they played a hell of a game against Kansas City, and they ended up losing in overtime. I view them as the biggest riser simply because they are, in my mind, first of all, the best team in the AFC, and second of all, relative to the rivals, they face a much easier schedule. Like Kansas City, and the entire AFC West is just a bear fight into the bear pit. And you have the North with Cincinnati and Baltimore competing with each other. And the South, I mean, yes, if Matt Ryan still has some juice left, the Colts could be really tough. But for the most part, Buffalo has the clear path to the 1 seed in the AFC. And I know the 1 seeds did not particularly do well last year. They didn't even make the championship games. But getting the single bye in the conference is a pretty big edge. And I view Buffalo as the biggest riser. I haven't thought much about the biggest fallers, so I guess we'll just cover that later.
That's fine. Okay. And the 2 more questions before the preview. So for the first one here is the best and worst coaching hires from this
in terms
year.
of a good coaching hire, I'd love the Pittsburgh Brian Flores hiring. He is an excellent coach. That's actually one of the reasons he pissed off the Dolphins so much. Is he was able to win games with a shitty roster when they were just outright tanking. Created some bad blood there and eventually led to a lawsuit. He's going to make a difference in Pittsburgh. He is an excellent defensive mind. We'll see his presence fairly soon. In terms of a bad coaching hire, we've only seen from the Giants GM coach new combo that they hired from Buffalo the draft. And on the draft, they had a great first day. They took Thibodeau first with their 5th overall pick, and then they had the 7th overall pick. I thought that was pretty good because that allowed them to get a premier offensive lineman with 2 on the board. So, I mean, not necessarily genius level move, but it was a good move. They made the right decision. So they took Thibodeau, and then they took Neal, who's my favorite offensive lineman. Great first day. Could not have been happier. And then for their next 8 picks over day 2 and day 3, they were all reaches. At which point I realized that we might be a little screwed here. So yeah, that was very disconcerting, and the fact that it was effectively a coach GM combo leads me to be concerned about both of them at this point. Obviously, the coach should not bear the sins of the GM, but I'm concerned about both, and I'm definitely worried about the Giants GM. I think that was awful.
Okay, yeah. The weird thing is, like, I guess maybe it was before the draft. I thought, like, or maybe it was like not general consensus, but I feel like there was a bunch of people that thought hiring someone like that guy was gonna, be good. I don't remember his. I know he was on the Bills, but I don't remember what led people to that conclusion, thinking that he would, like, he would be, a good hire, and he still could be. But I just for some reason I remember that being like one of the more heralded hires, like at least before the draft. Like you said, the draft, I wasn't aware of their reaches in the draft, so.
I got to tell you, one thing we're nailing between yesterday and today is we're definitely getting the beer caps.
Yeah, I think I gotta just throw these away here. Okay, so the last part here, I did have a question here about the Jaguars. They had the first big signing with Kirk, and my question here was related to whether they had set the bar for the free agent market, or if this was just gonna happen regardless of how much they signed Kirk for, because that was a pretty like bonkers deal, like for the type of receiver that we perceive Kirk to be.
So let me answer the specific question. Are the Jaguars to blame for the wide receiver market going bonkers? The answer is hell no. And the reason for that is you have to have multiple market participants be willing to shift from the old normal price to the new normal price. You have to have multiple teams buy in. No single team. I mean, a player or a team can reset a price, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stick. And in this case, it has. As a matter of fact, we could argue it's been surpassed. And the reason for that is teams want to get better. And the best way to do that is to improve your offense. The best way to improve your offense is to improve your passing game. And now, while the best way to improve your passing game is to get a better quarterback, those are generally out of stock. You might want to find a better quarterback, but that is rather difficult. Saw Denver pay through the nose, and that was just a rare situation where one became available because Russell Wilson wanted out. Otherwise, we've seen all this drama with Aaron Rodgers, but he's stuck around. So generally, quarterbacks don't leave. Generally, the teams that have them make them happy. And so the other alternative is tank and trade up for a draft pick. In that case, you get a lottery ticket in quarterback. In terms of finding proven talent, it's much easier to do so wide receiver. And so that's why, with the cost, the ability to purchase constrained at quarterback, a lot of the effort has gone to acquiring premium wide receivers. We saw that with the Dolphins trying to surround particularly with young quarterbacks on rookie contracts. We've seen the Dolphins try to surround Tua with talent. The Jets use their 10th overall pick. Generally, when you have a young quarterback, you try to help them succeed, except if you're the Chicago Bears. So, no, Jacksonville is not at all to blame for the quarterback market going bonkers. That's just the reality of teams trying to get better, and wide receiver being one of the better ways for them to do it, at least on paper.
Okay. All right. So let's just dive right into the preview here. I think you have the NFC East listed here first.
Yeah, let's start with Dallas. Although, interestingly, overnight this changed. I believe they signed Jason Peters. I'm going to Google that right now.
Yeah, that was like mid-afternoon, I think. Late afternoon, I think I read that.
Yeah, just after we had finished the pod yesterday. So this is at least the silver lining, us being able to record today. So yeah, they lost over the offseason 2 of their top wide receivers. They traded Amari Cooper. And by the way, they traded Amari Cooper before the wide receiver market went nuts. So at the price they traded Cooper for, it looks like the Browns, I believe, got a steal relative to the market pricing. And then this preseason, they lost tackle. Terrence Smith went down with an injury, and they've just signed Jason Peters, which might help mitigate the damage a little bit. Too late for me to put into my NFC preview. I'll make an update noting that he'll be starting. But yeah, like the Cowboys had a rough offseason. They lost a lot of talent. And just one thing I want to note, when they were in the playoffs last season against the 49ers, that Dallas team, I mean, they'd outscored their opponents by 173 points, I believe, over the regular season. But they weren't considered monsters at that point because Dak Prescott was physically compromised. After he got hurt early in the season, I think week 6, their offense went from being among or possibly the best in the NFL to being a little below average. And that's the kind of offense that arrived in the playoffs, and San Francisco did a good job slowing them down. So, like, last year was kind of a frustrating one for Dallas. And this year, they simply don't have the same amount of talent on their roster than they had last year, even with this signing. So it looks like another year of disappointment in Dallas. And I got to tell you, that brings me nothing but joy. So, and then we have the Giants. So, as I know before, that draft was balls. I mean, the first round was great, and then so, like, the front office, and we have a situation where, in theory, the Giants should be tanking because they do not have their quarterback of the future on the roster. They don't have Jones even signed for another year, which obviously is good for the Giants. They don't have to deal with him anymore, but it also creates strong incentives for the players. So we have that with Jones, and we have that with Saquon Barkley. And players who are playing for a new contract, we always hear this term, in the best shape of their lives. But in that case, it might actually be true. Like, nothing so focuses the mind as the sight of the gallows. That's a quote from Samuel Johnson. When your career is at a crossroads, when you have to play for a new deal, there is a statistically notable slight effect. It's how not much quantified, I don't know. A lot of players just play hard all the time, in which case you're not going to see much from them in the contract year. But
so to clarify, you see it both like in, well, you said not quantifiable, but could you see it like in film? You think?
So what you see is you see the absence of fucking around.
Okay.
So, like, when you're playing for a new contract, you don't miss meetings. You don't show up late to meetings. Like, you don't skip film sessions. You stay on your diet. There's a whole bunch of things that you don't see that you might see from a player who knows he's safe. When you know you're safe, you might check emails during a meeting or watch a YouTube video or whatever it is. TikTok for the kids these days. But with Barkley and with Jones, like, their heart is going to be fully in it this season, which is a problem for the Giants because they want to lose. Like, the Giants at least should want to lose. But last year, so Joe Judge, he was probably going to keep his job if he just kept his mouth shut. But he embarrassed the organization both with this play calling, like that 3rd and 4th dive from like 3rd and 12. You remember this? This is some of the most embarrassing play calls we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And like ownership with his press conferences, they just couldn't take it anymore, and so they had to fire him. And ownership has one goal this season: do not embarrass us. And so 7-10 is not embarrassing. 7-10 is all right. We did our best. We went 7-10. But the problem with 7-10 is while there are, at least right now, 5 different quarterbacks that might go first overall, we don't necessarily know how many of them are going to have good seasons, how many of them are going to do well in the scouting process and the combine process. And there probably will not be an elite quarterback left if you just sit your spot at 7-10. So it means the Giants are probably going to have to trade up to get their quarterback of the future, the potential franchise quarterback. So that's a problem. You have
it's a difficult balance between not wanting to embarrass yourself and also wanting to get a top quarterback next year. Very hard.
Exactly.
Line to toe.
Players don't tank.
Yeah.
And coaches aren't really supposed to tank either. That's actually one of the things that happened with Philadelphia with Doug Peterson losing his job when they tanked that last game against Washington, I believe. And so the Giants, we have the front office, the coach, the players. Like, it looks like they're all going to do their best to win. which means again 7-10, which is the worst thing. Like maybe 8-9 is worse, but like that's as really as bad as it gets because you don't have a successful season and you don't build for the future, and that's where I think the Giants are.
Okay.
And then Philadelphia, they have a legitimately great roster. Their front office has done a good job of providing a nice depth of talent around the roster with some premium players, and they've gotten some nice wide receivers. They've built everything they need except they don't have the quarterback. They've got Jalen Hurts or Gardner Minshew. And like Hurts might be fine, might be okay, but he's certainly not elite. He's shown that. He's shown his limitations. Had the Eagles been the team to trade for Russell Wilson, and obviously we don't necessarily know what they would have to give up, but let's just say they mostly had to give up like draft capital instead of Drew Lock. They had to give up Jalen Hurts and blah blah blah. They would be the team to beat in the NFC. The NFC would not be wide open if they had an elite quarterback, but they don't. And so they're a very, very good team missing the most important piece. Those are my thoughts on Philly. Like they have a soft schedule too, which is very helpful for them. With Washington, like as I wrote down here, Lowell Wentz, like that is an expensive way to tank. If he had anything left in the tank, he'd still be in Indianapolis. And realistically, if he had anything left in the tank, he'd still be in Philadelphia. Yep. He's just an awful post-injury. He's just a bust. And that happens. You remember RG3. He was awesome before Shanahan broke him that playoff game against Seattle. And after that, he was pretty terrible. And that's Wentz. Wentz post-injury is just very limited. And he's not a good quarterback, which is why the Colts lost to Jacksonville last year in a very, very embarrassing finale. So yeah, let's again. I enjoy seeing Washington do poorly. In fact, I think I enjoy seeing Washington do poorly more than I enjoy seeing Dallas do poorly, even though I really dislike both franchises. But I hate ownership of Washington even more. Like Jerry Jones is fun and he's trying to win. Yeah, nothing good to say about Washington. All right. Chicago, your boys, even though you're a 49ers fan, but at least you're around Chicago. Sure. So they have, again, an unusual situation. We may have talked about this in yesterday's pod, where they allowed Pace, the previous GM, to pick a second franchise quarterback, but they didn't allow him to stick around and try and develop him. So we have this new front office who has a guy who's not their guy, and they're basically doing nothing to try and help Fields succeed. Now, this has a benefit for them in terms of kind of a stealth tank, which would allow them, A, to drive down the value of Fields, which means they'll be able to get rid of him, and B, select their own franchise quarterback, the guy that they're going to develop, the guy who is going to determine whether or not they get to keep their jobs. So, like, it's very unusual to see a team have a young franchise quarterback on a rookie contract and not try to provide them with talent.
Sorry to interrupt. That I when we were after the pod, I remembered that they did the same thing with Trubisky, where they drafted him under Fox and fired Fox. And
wait, the Bears have done this twice in a row. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
How dumb of a franchise do you have to be?
Yeah.
Do you not understand the poor incentives there, where like he's not your guy, he's like not your circus, not your monkeys, not your problem? Like
it's not a good look.
I mean, I understand you have the principal agent problem the other way when you draft a young quarterback and you over invest in resources to try and make the quarterback look good so you keep your job, when to the detriment possibly of your franchise. Like in the case of the Jets selecting Wilson over the safety Kyle Hamilton, I wasn't happy about that, but I understood it. I get it. Like they want Zach Wilson, the quarterback, to succeed, so they're giving him better wide receivers. I get it. That's fine. It's human nature, except in Chicago. So they're kind of screwed. In Detroit, I love their head coach. I love Dan Campbell. Like, it might eventually wear off, but he's getting his players to give the proverbial 110%. You just watch a Lions game, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch a team like give a shit, even though they know they're not going to win, and they really do. It's fun watching them. Also, they may have caught a break in the draft when the Jacksonville Jaguars they took Walker out of Georgia because he had this amazing combine, and also he played at Georgia, which is a nice badge of this guy might be pretty good. And Aiden Hutchinson, who I would have had as the top overall non-quarterback in this year in the week quarterback draft, the top overall player, he fell to them even though they had the second pick. So I think Detroit got a bit of a break there. In terms of Green Bay, we still have the greatest rivalry in sport, Aaron Rodgers versus his front office. Like the Devontae Adams trade, I get it. Like they didn't have to pay the guy, and B, they got a haul of picks. It's the same way with the Chiefs trading Tyreek Hill. But in both situations, you have a contender closing or at least narrowing their championship window, trading away an elite player, an elite wide receiver, when they have a quarterback who pairs very well with him. And you have Rodgers in this preseason just going off on his young wide receivers because they're dropping balls. Like, he doesn't stand for that shit. Rodgers doesn't like young wide receivers to begin with.
Yeah.
And when they don't perform, he just loses his shit. So it's going to be very fun to watch life without Adams in Green Bay. Like, we got Lazard, Watkins, and Cobb. Oh, my. And then Minnesota, like this, I guess it feels like it happens every few years. This is their time. This is their chance. Like, time to actually win the division. Like, Cousins isn't bad. Is he great? No. Is he elite? No, but he's good. Like, if Philadelphia had Cousins, I think they'd be in much better shape. He's a good quarterback. And he's got a solid wide receiver core. Like, Jefferson is elite. Thielen's pretty good. One concern is the running back Cook might have a fork in him. He might have just taken too many hits and not be the player he once was. That's 1% concern. But like, Minnesota has a very good chance at finally taking the division from Green Bay now that Green Bay isn't as good as they were. Atlanta tanked for question mark. Whoever the new quarterback is, next year will have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and a well-rested Calvin Ridley, which is nice. Like, whoever they are here to lose this year, and next year they're going to get their man, and he's going to have some guys to throw to. So Atlanta has a plan: tank, find your quarterback.
Sure.
Carolina, their team. I hope I mentioned this before, that I view having the most variance of any team in the NFL. Because if Baker Mayfield, like, he's been hurt the last few years in Cleveland, but when he was healthy, he was a good quarterback. And if that's the guy Carolina is getting, they could win like double-digit games. They could be a real problem in that division. It's a fine roster otherwise, but if Baker Mayfield is compromised, if he's damaged from what he was and he can't be that player anymore, or if he even goes down, like, they don't have a backup. They have nothing. Like, Darnold's hurt and the rookie Matt Corral is hurt. And so they could win 2 games if Baker Mayfield just doesn't have it anymore, or if he gets hurt. So they are embracing the variance. But my expectation is that he's going to be better than he was in Cleveland the last couple of years. So, as I wrote down here, frisky kitties. New Orleans. Winston is quietly becoming a real quarterback. He's not the 30-30 guy he was from years ago when he threw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. Yeah, they should make an ESPN show about that, 30 for 30. So, like, he takes advantage of his strengths, and he doesn't try to be a hero. He doesn't make these incredibly risky passes anymore. And so, with him as a real quarterback, the Saints might have a very good post-Breeze Peyton era. It could begin with a bang. They're a team who I like. And then we have Tampa Bay. Their offensive line has gone from being a strength to a question mark. And if their right tackle, Wirfs is awesome. When he went down against Philadelphia last year, that was a huge problem that showed up in the Los Angeles game. If Wirfs goes down again, they're fucked. And if Brady goes down again, Brady goes down. Well, technically, again, he went down once in New England. Goes down again, they're fucked. So they still have a strong roster. Like their defense now might be what carries them, but I don't view them as clear favorites anymore. And part of that is because no Gronk. Gronk stayed retired, and Brady's 45. Like he's not immune to aging. So like sooner or later it's going to show up, and it might just be a slow decline. It might be a slight decline, but even though he was really good last year, we'll see what he is this year. So apart from Atlanta, this division might be sneaky tough. Arizona, I think they missed their window. I don't know if we talked about this yesterday pod, the first half, the second half, but Kyler Murray is a smaller guy, and when you're a smaller guy, you start taking hits over the course of the season. Might do more damage to you than it would to, say, a bigger guy. So, I don't like what they've done with the roster. I didn't love the Hollywood Brown trade. I think they're going to be a much worse team this year. I don't think they're making the again. The Rams, it's never good when your quarterback is practicing load management. They don't have Von Miller anymore. Their front seven is thin after Aaron Donald. They do not look as scary as they did last season. And then we have San Francisco, where we have the Lance Garoppolo dynamic. I know we talked about that in the pod. So this is a team that played in 2 of the last 3 NFC Championship games. And I think they're going back. Lance should be ready. He's got his year of seasoning, a year of training under Shanahan. We saw him a little bit last season, and he played reasonably well. I think he should be ready for his close-up. And Garoppolo he's fine. Like, as a backup, as an insurance policy, he's basically the best in the league. And so, like, him taking that reduced contract and coming back was a big freaking deal. It wasn't what anyone wanted. It wasn't what Lance wanted. It wasn't what Garoppolo wanted. It wasn't what the front office wanted. They gave his agents permission to seek a trade. But in the end, I think this will work out well for San Francisco. And then finally with Seattle, like, again, Lowell, Drew Lock, you couldn't beat out Geno Smith. So, like, they, like it or not, like, had they wanted to go full tank, they would have traded away their wide receivers. They would have traded away Lockett and Metcalf, because I know teams were calling. And once the prices went up, they could have gotten King's ransoms for both of them and just blown it all up. But that's not what Carroll wanted. He's not a young man. It's not what Seattle wanted. And so they're going to lose this year, and then next year find a quarterback, and hopefully that new guy can hit the ground running with Lockett and Metcalf. So one thing about them is they've drafted really poorly over the last few years, and thankfully they did that awful trade with the Jets to get Adams. So, like, the bill is due on their poor decisions of the last couple of years. For Buffalo, Allen was awesome 2 years ago. Last year, he was just okay. He was a little better than average, but he wasn't great. So this year, if he splits the difference, Buffalo's the clear AFC favorite. And if he gets back to what he was 2 years ago, they should win it in a walk. They have a soft division. They have a good roster. The AFC West is some bullshit. So, like, and one of the other things is they've invested in a really deep pass rush. One of the things that a great line from Bill Walsh is what wins football games, a fourth quarter pass rush. They will have that. They've built their team to win the playoffs. So, and then we have Miami, where Tua he's surrounded by maybe the best weapons in the league, like with Hill and Waddle and Mostert. He showed he still got his speed in this preseason. Like, this is a team that both Tua and backup Teddy Bridgewater have many of the same injury-influenced limitations, same weaknesses. And this is a team that could use a quarterback with a live arm. They have so much team speed. As I may mention yesterday, like, they have the most team speed I've seen on any team since the old Al Davis 70s, 80s Raiders, when he was signing track stars and trying to teach them how to play football.
Yeah, except I think you had said that the difference was these guys actually have, like, NFL talent.
Oh yeah, these guys can play.
Yeah,
which is a big difference. So, like, if they had a real quarterback, they would be terrifying.
Yeah.
They have Tua. So for New England, the Patriots fans are legit shook over how that offense looked in the preseason. I don't generally put much stock in preseason. I think Jones is what he is. I don't think he's got a great set of weapons to work with. Like this team is drafted really oddly, which means terribly over the last few years, which has hollowed out the roster. And when they had Brady covering up the mistakes, like Belichick, well, when you're viewed as a genius, your odd decisions are eccentric. But now that the team isn't doing so well, they should just look weird. And that's what they are. Like, so he's been drafting his guys, and his guys haven't done so well. So yeah, that hurts them. And then yeah, exactly. I didn't love the draft, but I understood it. Like they took the star cornerback over the star pass rusher, which is not what I like doing. I prefer to go the other direction, but fine. With the 4th overall pick. And then with the 10th pick, I'd have preferred the star safety over the really good wide receiver. But again, I get it. The real problem is that Zach Wilson. So 2 years before he was drafted, he wasn't really viewed as great. He had problems with good defenses. And then his last college year, he did great. He was given lots of protection from his offensive line. He did not face great defenses. He feasted on weaker teams, and he looked awesome on film. He had a good combine. The Jets were sold. They took him 2nd overall. But in the NFL, every defense is good. Even the bad defenses are good. And he has not looked great. He's looked pretty poor. And so the Jets might have a real problem. They might have drafted the wrong guy. I mean, I don't know if I think we talked about Fat Music's question yesterday, but if not, I'm going to repeat it. Sorry, guys. Besides Rosen, who's the next Josh Rosen? And my answer was, well, I'd like to see Rosen run it back, somehow convince the team to sign up for $25 million a year and then perform even worse than before. But the correct answer is Zach Wilson. And that makes me sad. For Baltimore, I loved their draft. So when I do my player ratings, I do them against the ideal for their position. So just because I put a safety 1st overall, like I put a running back 1st overall with Saquon Barkley, doesn't mean I'm going to draft them 1st overall. But like the Ravens ended up with my number 1 and number 8 overall players with the 14th and 25th picks respectively. They got a safety and a center. I know not premium picks, but they got elite players. And they're just a very smart team. Like the Eagles, perhaps even better than the Eagles, they've done an awesome job of roster construction. They are deep with a lot of talent. The one area where they kind of cheaped out on is wide receiver. They traded away Hollywood Brown. And I don't think that was a bad trade. I think it was a good trade. But they've not given Jackson the best of weapons. And so, like, he's a better passer than people think. He's not trying to beat teams with legs. He'll take advantage of them, but like he can beat opponents with his arm. They do not have a great set of wide receivers. Otherwise, very strong roster. So I feel like they're one weapon short. Cincinnati, elite quarterback, elite wide receiver, both on rookie contracts. Must be nice. They were not a great team last season. They took advantage of their schedule and they had some luck. And they're fighting at this point for Baltimore for division supremacy. One thing they did do is they had to improve what had been a terrible offensive line, which will give Burrow that much more time. This year, they should turn the quarter in the regular season. Cleveland has 11 games of Jacoby Brissett, and then what? So, as you pointed out yesterday, they don't own their draft pick. So they don't have any incentive to tank. So no matter what, after 11 games, they'll be trying to win. So Watson might be in a situation where they could run the table and make the playoffs, or they might be eliminated and they just want to build on something for the next year. But without any incentives to tank, we should see what they can do starting week 12. But for the first 11 games, yeah, they don't have a real quarterback. They've got Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah. Now, do you see that? Like, do you see them potentially going for Garoppolo? Because I know that's like maybe a potential spot, but I don't know if Cleveland.
No, I think once Garoppolo re-signs, like both San Francisco and he's a free agent after the season, he's gone. But this year he's in San Fran. I think that was the crux of the deal. And so no, I don't. I think Cleveland is simply accepting the season is what it is. We're going to start competing for championships next year, and next year they should have a solid roster. Once they have Watson, they do have a lot of the other pieces. And then we have Pittsburgh. I mentioned before. I loved their draft. They got Pickett and they got Pickens. So Pickens had injury red flags, but the teams, they see the medicals. I don't, and I couldn't read them if I did. But clearly, like, he passed. So they grabbed a quarterback and wide receiver in the first, second round. I also love the Flores hire, and I like the Trubisky hire. I'm curious to see what he can do in black and gold. So in the post Roethlisberger era, they're going to have real quarterbacks with real live arms. They're a well-run franchise for the most part, so they could sneak in. They could be a wild card team again this season.
Yeah. It wouldn't like just knowing like what's happened in the Tomlin era would not shock me for them to be like 9-8, be the 7th seed.
Yeah, they've done some good things this offseason. It's one of those things where I wish my team was smart. I wish my team did things like that Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia did. Like, if you miss a new quarterback, you miss a new quarterback. Fine. We know that's a crapshoot. But, like, do the other stuff right, please.
You could get away with still making the playoffs with a like mid-tier quarterback if you do the other things right.
Yeah. And now we have the weakest division league, the AFC South, which generally has the 4:00 wild card hosting playoff game. Yeah, it's kind of a habit with them. So we have Houston. So what Houston did 2 years ago is they went 4-12 with an elite performance from Deshaun Watson. That you have to be a truly shit franchise to do that, to get great quarterback play and go 4-12, and also do that, by the way, again with a weak schedule in the South. They are a shit franchise with a shit son of an owner, and so they in Atlanta are the solid tank favorites for the first overall pick. With Indianapolis, they are out with Wentz, in with old man Ryan. Like, even with Wentz, they should have made the playoffs. That's how good their roster is. If Ryan is good, if still some juice left in him, he could be the scary team that everyone feared they would be. Like, they were everyone's favorite dark horse. And if Ryan is good, then they'll be so again. For Jacksonville, I'm giving them a full mulligan because last year they had a coach who was in over his head, and yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm pretty sure we talked about just how bad Urban Meyer was yesterday. So, like, yeah, a full mulligan for Trevor Lawrence. The roster's now better. The front office is no longer tanking. So they have a competent coach. They have a decent roster. So we should see some real improvement from it. For Tennessee, they had what I viewed as the worst first-round pick in the draft. And I wrote that about Treylon Burks before the draft. Like, whoever ended up with him, they got the whammy. But they also had my favorite pick in the entire draft when they added Malik Willis. And he fell in the third round. So my thoughts about Willis before the draft were, I figured he might go as early as second, pretty good shot in the top 10, and almost certainly would go in the first round. And that's what the betting odds were as well. He, like, over 1.5 quarterbacks was indeed the favorite. And so I figured he'd go in the first round. And there was this meme where it's never worked out for the other people, but it could work out for us. And that was the meme I used for Willis because he was inaccurate in college. He did not have great results his senior year. And so I figured that was something to be concerned about. But, like, he didn't go in the first round. And he didn't go in the second round. And once, like, you do that, like, I mean, the risk is gone. You don't get fired for missing on quarterbacks in the third round. You can cut them after a year and no one bats an eye.
Sure.
So, like, when Malik Willis doesn't work out, no GMs were harmed in the making of this picture. So, like, yeah, he could be awesome. When I talked about like the picks I missed on, like Josh Allen turning on the third year, and Justin Herbert, he's hitting the ground running. Like, I missed on those players because they were inaccurate in college, and I didn't figure you don't become more accurate in the pros, but they did. And now teams have gotten better at coaching college quarterbacks. It's become more important about finding the tools and the skills. And he has them. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's got the legs you want to threaten defenses. So he can be the most valuable asset in the league, a young potential franchise quarterback. But he does have a lot of issues to solve. Teams felt that he wasn't NFL ready. And now he's a third-round pick. He's going to sit behind Tannehill. I don't know how much Tannehill can teach him, but like they're going to train him, and maybe in a year, maybe 2 years, they'll have, well, a guy which everyone wondered, why the hell did we pass on this guy? So very, very excited for them. Loved that pick. But as for the rest of the roster, like they were the one seed in the AFC last year, and they kind of bullshitted their way into it because they were an average team. Looking at how good they were by DVOA, but whatever you want to look at, they were average.
Yeah.
And you have to grab the number one overall seed. And then they lost at home to Cincinnati. So Tannehill has proven he's not elite. He can have good seasons when there's 8 in the box. Stop Derrick Henry. He can take advantage of that. But now Henry has so much wear and tear on him. I don't think the defense is going to be as worried about him anymore. And I think it's going to be a lot harder for Tannehill. And I think Tennessee is going to be on the decline. We'll make sure of any other notes. Yeah. So, like, I not great time in Tennessee. Again, weak division. Denver, dear Russell Wilson, please make Jerry Jeudy look good. Thanks in advance. So last season, Wilson was starting. He didn't have a great season 2 years ago. But this year, he's going to have a chance to remind people why he's been to 2 Super Bowls, why he won a starting job as a third-round rookie. He's a guy who extends the play and tries to make defenses pay with the deep ball. So he's exciting to watch. Denver's going to be exciting to watch, and they're going to be a lot better this year. Kansas City, that schedule is balls. The offense is going to miss Hill. So there's the line coach Andy Reid uttered last year to Patrick Mahomes when they're down against Buffalo. When the situation is grim, be the Grim Reaper. And that's what Patrick Mahomes is going to have to be all season long. Because the offense, they've lost their best weapon. And so now he's going to be playing on hard mode. And he's going to have to be all Madden quarterback that he is. But again, their schedule is so much harder than the Chargers' schedule. Like the extra game that the 17th game that they have to go to Tampa Bay, and the Chargers are going to Atlanta. And then there's the AFC games where I believe the Chiefs get Buffalo and they get the Bengals. And I don't even remember who the Chargers get. Got to look it up right now. And then there's Vegas. They've added Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones, and they're going to try to run it back, try to make it back to the playoffs. I mean, they were a good team last year. They weren't a great team, but they were fine. And this year they want to get better. The problem is Carr is the weakest quarterback in just a ridiculous division. And Carr's fine. Carr's good. Not great. He's good. But whatever. You got Mahomes, you've got Russell Wilson, and you've got Justin Herbert. Speaking of Justin Herbert, the Chargers have a young elite quarterback and a young elite left tackle on a rookie contract. Must be nice. And they've got their soft schedule compared with Kansas City. I haven't done a salary cap analysis at all, but it feels like they could have done a lot more in free agency. I know they re-signed their safety, and they're preparing to re-sign Herbert and eventually sign Slater. But the problem is their ownership, like the Bengals ownership, is notoriously cheap. And so that's one of the reasons why their special teams have been weaker throughout the years than they could have been, because they just didn't spend in discretionary areas where it would have had an effect on the back end of the roster. And so let me just looking up the Chargers schedule now. Yes. They go to Cleveland earlier in the season when they get to face Jacoby Brissett. So yeah, and that whoever they face in the South, they aren't. Oh right, they face in the South all 4 teams. That's the West is facing the South this year. So yeah, yep, that's my schedule teams recap. Let's take listener questions now.
Okay, so the first one that we have here from
Rick.
Rick, yeah, we already covered the Fat Music one. The Rick question about where do you slot the Green Bay defense, and yeah, I think we discussed. I don't think it's fantasy related. I think it's just where they rank in terms of team defenses.
So one of the things that Aaron Rodgers particularly loves is Green Bay feels like always using their first round draft picks on defense. And this year they invested multiple draft picks in the defense, which will pay off in the long run, which will help a little bit immediately, but more it's a long-term thing. I have them being middle of the road, around 17th or so in DVOA. Their defense should be fine. Not great, not bad.
Okay. All right, and then the next one was related to was from Dylan Mervis. He asked about how important scheme is relative to personnel in terms of percent piece of the pie to offense and defense, and he had a link to a survey about relative impact of positions on winning with basing everything off of the QB like being the most impactful position.
So I agree wholeheartedly that QB is most impactful. Like one of the ways to look at an NFL roster is you have the quarterback, you have the rest of the offense, and then you have the defense, and then finally special teams. And so like maybe like 30%, 25%, 30%, 10%, or whatever you want to do it. But like quarterback is clearly hugely impactful. Then the rest of the offense matters too, and then the defense matters. Less than the offense matters, and then whatever. In terms of breaking down the positions, like after quarterback, I put the most valuable position as the number 1 wide receiver, at least on offense, and then maybe number 2 wide receiver, maybe left tackle. I haven't done any research into this. In terms of scheme dependence, one of the things, and again, I highly recommend read the books that Bill Walsh wrote. On defense, you need the athletes. You can't scheme around an ability to stop the run or to handle team speed, to cover guys. Defense, you need the guys. You need the talent. Offensively, you can win with creativity. You can scheme guys open, either with timing against man-to-man or find the holes in the zone. And the running plays, you can have 3 blockers against 2 defenders and try to attack a situation where the second level of the defense won't be there immediately. Like you can scheme yards in offense. But still, even in offense, on some level, you do need the dudes at quarterback. Scheme matters in terms of maximizing what the quarterback can do. The better your quarterback, the freer your playbook is. One of the things with coaches is if you have to run their way, you run the risk of not maximizing your talent. One of the great things about Don Shula was he adapted to his players very, very well. Like you might have had to practice his way, you might have had to do what he told you, but the actual plays called, the actual way the offense was run.
Oh, I lost you again. Okay, so yeah, you were left off with Shula. We got cut off there again, but if you could pick up with Shula again relating to the scheme part of that question.
All right, so just so everyone knows, we had another bit of technical difficulties picking up again with Don Shula. I mean, Shula was a legendary hard ass, but he was remarkably adaptable when it came to scheme and what kind of offense he would run, and that he would maximize his talent. He would design plays and design an entire offense around the things that his guys could do and try to hide the things his guys couldn't do. He was a pretty forward-minded coach in that respect, even if he was a hard ass in so many other ways. So much respect to Don Shula. Great coach.
Okay. Yeah, and I never really understood why teams try to fit square pegs into round holes with like if you gotta if like the Bears last year, I don't think they really utilized Fields' skills that well. Like, and I don't really know if that had to do with Nagy not wanting him or what it was, because I felt like Nagy was like forced to play Fields. So like I don't know if how much he really cared to adjust to Fields. So like I don't know. I guess that's kind of one example that I could think of right off the top of my head.
Mhm.
Um, all right. So Hagrin had a couple questions. The first one was, what if any adjustments has Seth made to account for the additional week now that we have some but limited data?
All right. So the additional week, I'm going to use an accounting term. It is material, which is to say it matters. There are three things about it that are worth mentioning. The first is that these are unbalanced schedules. So it gives team, we go from two, we'll call them discretionary games, to three. So the way NFL scheduling works is your division, you play 6 games in the division, you play 4 games against one other conference division, and you play 4 games against one other out of conference division. So just hypothetically, the AFC West will face the NFC West and the AFC South. And then what you'll do is you'll play, or at least historically what you do is you'd play the team with the same finishing position in the division as you in the 2 other divisions you didn't play. So you'd face, in this case, one team from the AFC North and one team from the AFC East. What they've added is you now face one other team from an NFC division that finished with the same finishing position as you. And so this year we have the Chargers, who get to face the Atlanta Falcons and the I just looked up the teams before, but their discretionary game, the additional added games against the Atlanta Falcons, while the Kansas City Chiefs have a game at Tampa Bay. And so yeah, both the road games, that all the AFC the games are at the NFC this year. Last year the NFC was at the AFC, but it's one other additional game, which makes it harder on the teams that finished presumably first, and easier for the teams that finished low on the division. And then there's the fact that over the course of the season, the course of 17 games, the starters play more snaps earlier in the season, a higher percentage of the snaps. And as they get hurt or just nagging injuries, whatever the case may be, the backups play more. They play a higher percentage of the snaps. And so the addition of a 17th game, you have more snaps being played by backups relative to the number of snaps being played by the starters. And so that matters. Roster depth becomes that much more important. And then there's the playoffs. In the playoffs itself, with an additional game of wear and tear, with the 17th game, there's always some slim chance, maybe a 4% chance, 3% chance, 10% chance, who the hell knows, in an individual game, that you lose a starter. And so in the playoffs, you're going to have a higher percentage of the snaps go to the backups because of the 17th game. And all this it's small, but it adds up. And so, yes, there are 3 things about the additional week that, I mean, yes, we have more data, but like it's, as I wrote in the outline, with Kansas City going to Tampa Bay and the Chargers going to Atlanta, it feels a little Harrison Bergeron-esque, if you ask me. We're trying to make things even more equal for every team. The better you did last season, the harder your job is this year. So
Okay.
that's the effect of 17 games.
Okay. And then his last question, I guess you had time to research after the bad recording yesterday, but his second one was about PFF's recent adjustment attempt at grading historical comeback play. Or cornerback play, sorry.
It's cornerback, right?
Cornerback play, sorry, yes.
Yeah,
Cornerback
exactly.
play. Yes.
So so the thing is, and maybe we can attach this to the link from yesterday, is I hadn't seen this, and now I have. And there's this meme with this dog. Have you seen this dog? And you can tear off a thing. I have now. And so this is what PFF did is they modified their they've changed their ratings formula. And what happened was Trevon Diggs, who presumably they had as a poor cornerback, having bad coverage numbers, let's say they had him as a bad cornerback because of how their grading system worked. And they've changed that. Now, the thing about Diggs is he is, and I wrote this in my NFL preview, he's basically the god of gamblers. When a cornerback is considered a gambler, it means they try to go for interceptions and run the risk of giving up big plays or even just first downs. And Diggs takes his risks, which means you will have a higher percentage of first downs when targeting him than you would targeting other elite cornerbacks. But the thing about Diggs is he also gets an absurd number of interceptions. And those are huge. Those, like, throwing at him is terrifying because if you make a mistake, he will break on the ball. And there's a pretty good shot you'll get picked off if you throw it off target or throw it late or whatever else. And like having him as the second best cornerback the last 15 years, I have no idea. I haven't really thought about that in particular. But I know he's excellent. And if they had him as terrible and then changed him to them having him as excellent, well, good on them for learning. But like lol PFF for making the mistake to begin with, to undervalue interceptions or whatever else. So yeah, I appreciate that. Is PFF learning? Yes. But yeah, they deserve all the laughter and scorn being directed at them for this. And so yeah, there was a Hagrin pointed out there was a tweet by Rufus. Just went to check for my flight to Philly tomorrow and discover I'd booked a flight to Boston. Facepalm. And as this good promptly replied, you just have to be in the right direction of the line to win, Rufus. So directionally correct, PFF. Nice job.
All right. The next one here is from Iowa Skylar. How much can you deadlift? This is kind of a piggyback off of the question that we had last year, I think.
Yeah, last year we talked about the lamb. I would, as a favor to a restaurant, a regular at carried lamb downstairs. So the thing about me is my right shoulder is basically gone. It's made out of spaghetti at this point. But in my peak, I was able to lift more than my weight, but less than Bullock's weight, or less than your weight. So,
fair enough.
Hopefully that answers the question.
I think so. All right, Clyde has had two questions, but one we already kind of addressed with the variance question he had. He had a list of teams in terms of which one would finish with the worst record, and there was a list of 7 teams, I think. Rather than just read them all off, I'll let you just kind of go over which ones you think might have any value, perceived value.
So in terms of the worst record, incentives matter. It's like getting thrown out of an Applebee's. You've got to really want it. And that's the problem with recording today. Yesterday you laughed.
Yeah, you're right. It is a problem, and you're right. The Applebee's part is funny because I have 2 $10 gift cards of Applebee's sitting in a tray upstairs from like a Christmas gift like 5 or 6 years ago that I just kind of laugh at because I'm like, I'm never using these fucking things.
Do you even have an Applebee's near you, or are they in the Midwest?
We did, and the one that was closest to us turned into some bar, I think. So I don't even know where the nearest one is at this point.
Well, in that case, you're winning.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry for the Sorry.
No,
it's fine. Running this back again. I kind of hurt your feelings with not.
Laughing I was expecting. That's the worst part. I like. No. All right. So yeah. Back to incentives matter. So when you consider the worst teams, the 2 favorites are the Texans at plus 350 and the Falcons at plus 400. And this is pretty accurate because it's Davis Mills versus Marcus Mariota. It's a fair fight. Those 2 teams should be favored to win the worst record. The question is, who can snipe them? What are the teams that could come out of nowhere and steal the first overall pick from the Texans Falcons? And the second level of favorites are the Seahawks and the Bears plus 750. Now, we talked about the Bears doing their stealth tank in just not providing Fields with any help. He was drafted by the old administration. The new administration doesn't give a shit about him. They want their own guy. In terms of the Seahawks, if they wanted to go full tank again, they would have traded away their wide receivers. They're not going full tanking. Pete Carroll's not a young man. Like he likes winning. He's a happy guy on the sideline. Come on, let's do our best, guys. And so the Seahawks, they should be a bad team because again, if you're Geno Smith's your starting quarterback, you're not a good team. But I don't think they're as bad as the Davis Mills led Texans. And I think they're going to win more games than, say, the Falcons and Texans. Not many more, but more.
Okay.
Then the third tier is the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Panthers. So as down as I am on my Jets, as much as I think we may have made a Rosen-esque decision drafting Wilson, we're going to try really hard. Like, we've got a young coach. Like, we have our young franchise quarterback. We're in it to win it. So we're not tanking. We're trying. And I don't think it'll be us. I mean, as amusing as it would be to 2 years into the Wilson experiment, realize we could replace him, I don't think that's how it's going to play out. The Jaguars, definitely not. They are not having the worst record in the league. They've done it for the last 2 years. They're not pulling off a three-peat. And the reason for that is 2 years ago, they out-tanked the Jets. That's what they were going for, and they managed it. Sucks for me, but life goes on. Last year, they just hired an awful head coach, Urban Meyer. They were incompetent in every way they could be. They just were not an NFL franchise last year. They were not an NFL team. And that's how they pulled it off again. This year, they have a real coach. Whatever you could say about McDaniels, he is an NFL coach. They'll be able to play. They'll be able to compete. And Trevor Lawrence should be ready to play this year. So he'll show why he was the first overall pick. And they are not having the worst record in the NFL. I would eliminate the Jaguars from this list.
Okay.
The Panthers, well, they are a team I think they could win 10 games if Baker Mayfield is 100%. If he's not, or if he gets hurt, they could fall completely apart. So they're live for this. But again, they should not be among the favorites because they're better than those other teams on the list. And then it's worth talking about who could come from outside this list and snipe them. And one of the teams that was mentioned was Dan McClellan.
It was Dan Mahoney. You talk about on the Twitter.
Mahoney, yeah, Dan Mahoney.
Yeah, he picked the Redskins at 30-1 at his particular book.
First of all, if you want to say football
or
team,
Redskins, sorry,
Commanders.
Commanders. Sorry, yep. Might have to run this back again because I might get sued by the.
That's fine. They can't find us. But yeah, the Commanders are definitely live because Wentz is ridiculous. So they're not a well-run franchise, and yeah, they could snipe it, and they certainly have a decent price to do so. Apparently, at 30-1. At 30-1, I get it. And now I'm just going to take a look at the league. Who else is a possibility?
Yeah, you had mentioned the
we talked about Cleveland yesterday, but as you noted, they don't have their first pick. So that would be a situation where Houston could have first and second overall, which, while hilarious, is somewhat unlikely. Yep. So who else could pull off the snipe? It'd be amazing if Tennessee went from first to worst, being the number one overall seed, to the first overall pick. But that probably won't happen. As down as I am in Arizona, I don't think it's realistic. Detroit, they try too hard. They could have gotten it last year, but they had a decent offseason. They should be better this year. They should not really be in competition for the first overall pick. And the Giants, as we mentioned earlier, everyone's pulling in the wrong direction. Everyone's trying to win. The front office wants to win. The coaches want to win. The players want to win. They'll be given real effort. So, yeah, I think it'll come from one of those teams we talked about.
Okay. Oh, and then I forgot to ask you in the previous part your playoff prediction. I know you had mentioned the Niners in the you know making the NFC title game, but I don't think we actually discussed because usually you'll throw in your like at least your Super Bowl prediction or your Super Bowl
Yeah,
teams.
absolutely. So you remember what Boomer used to call for every year in
Yeah,
the 80s and 90s? I think just the
Buffalo.
90s.
Yeah, Buffalo and San Fran, and I think he was. I think he had one right like 7 straight years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yet they never played each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And this year,
That was a
that
shame. That was a
it
shame. That
was.
would
It
have
would have
been
been a fun game.
that would have been fun. Yeah.
Yep. And that's my pick this year. In terms of the NFC, I think the 49ers have a really deep roster. And the fact that they got Garoppolo back means, look, Lance could be awesome. He's got a year prep. Shanahan is now ready to unleash him, release the Kraken. And God forbid God forbid he's not everything they hope to be, or just not yet. They have the best insurance policy in the league. Garoppolo has taken them to two NFC championship games in the last 3 years. Like, say what you will about it. Yes, he wasn't the reason they made those games, but they played in those games.
Yeah.
He was there. So, like, yeah, they are my choice in a weak NFC. In terms of the AFC, I'm going with Buffalo. I think they have the best team in the conference, and I think they have the softer schedule relative to their competitors. So everything's coming up Millhouse for them. I think they should win. So
Okay.
we shall see.
All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap this Redux version of the?
Is there anything that we talked about yesterday that we missed today, or anything like?
Not that I could think of. I think we touched base on things. I think it helped. We had the epiphany of the Watson missing.
Yeah,
Or
that
the
was on you.
picks
That
missing.
was a good catch on your part.
So yeah, we kind of caught that, which would have been good radio, but that's fine. Um, but yeah, I think we got everything. And yeah, I was gonna say for the Dylan question, Dylan, if you're listening, if we didn't answer that question like you thought, you could always just tag us on the
I
uh,
know what we forgot.
what's that?
We forgot the meatloaf versus meatballs.
Oh yeah, and we didn't hit the yeah. So
What
yeah.
was the context of that came up yesterday? Where did that come up?
Um, I don't. It was in the middle of one of your previews because it was at like the 70-minute mark because I said it was 1 minute after nice
It
and
was exactly good memory, but
yeah,
I have
yeah.
no recollection of what we were discussing.
So yeah, I don't know, but all I remember was that you were asking me if I was a meatloaf or a meatball guy, and I
Yeah,
said
do you
that
prefer like red sauce or brown sauce? I remember
yeah,
that.
and I said yeah, I said in terms of like meat meatballs, I do meatball sandwiches, but if you're telling me like as a like a highlight of the dinner like a dinner as like opposed to a sandwich, I'm going with my wife's meatloaf.
Yeah, which is very honorable of you, although you
Yeah,
mentioned that she doesn't listen to the podcast.
yeah,
I
she
guess
doesn't. So
we talked about ground beef, and I have no recollection of why ground beef even came up.
I don't know if we were talking about Cincinnati or I don't even know when the segue of that happened. You kind of just brought that up like kind of out of nowhere, so it caught me off
Yeah,
guard. I don't remember the the context, but it was during one of your team previews, so I don't remember what the segue was, but
that's brutal.
unfortunately,
It
um,
has been lost to the ethos.
yeah, yeah, so it goes.
So it goes.
So okay, well, yeah, we did get the meatloaf mention in there, so there you go, Sizzle. Hopefully you're still listening, and yeah, I think that wraps it up. Seth, thanks for joining. I hopefully this actually records, and I'll let you know right away. I'll know right away as soon as I hit stop here if it's good, and otherwise, yeah, Seth, again, thanks for joining.
Thanks for
Good
having me,
luck.
Brian. Have a
Yeah,
wonderful season.
good luck this year, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Good luck this year, and I'll talk to you all soon. Have a good day.
Good day.
All right, bye.